Well, welcome back to the big EU business debate here at the Science Park. I'm joined by an out and an in. The in is John Stevens, former MEP, Conservative, and another Conservative, Irwin Armstrong from the Northern Ireland Conservatives, who is most definitely a Leave Europe person. So, going to start with you, John. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. You are passionate about EU membership, that we should stay. Convince us why.
This is a very dangerous world. We face enormous competition to keep our prosperity, and there is safety in scale. We need to have as a base the biggest single market in the world, and that is Europe.
When you're involved all over the world in business, you export, you travel the world in business, but yet you're convinced that we need to go. You're not buying John's argument?
Oh, I'm absolutely not buying the argument. When you remember, the European Union used to represent 35% of world trade, and it's now rapidly approaching 20%. There's 80% of the trade in the world is not actually in the European Union. And the difficulties with the European Union, it pretends as though it acts as one sole body. It isn't. It is 27 separate countries with protectionist ideas trying to keep other people out. So I'm passionately against us staying any longer. This is not what I voted for, and I confess I voted back in '75 first to join the EEC. I never voted to join the European Union.
Concern, though, from business that you are asking people to jump into a black hole of uncertainty. How are you convincing fellow businessmen and women that you're lobbying?
Look, it doesn't matter whether we stay inside the European Union or we leave. Britain will still succeed. What we're talking about, where it succeeds better, I'm convinced it will succeed better outside. When it gets back in control, I'm not interested particularly in the immigration debate, though I think we should have some controls over it, but we need a lot more immigrants into this country anyway. What I'm more interested in is our ability to do trade around the world, take the 20 billion that currently goes in, I know we get 10 billion back, and redeploy that doing things that we need to do. In Northern Ireland, for example, we have a problem with agriculture. That could be solved by using part of that, and every country in the world subsidises their agriculture. If our own local assembly had the ability to actually decide what they're spending on, instead of saying, oh, you've got 200 acres, here, have some money.
Agriculture is going to be much more protected inside the EU than it is if we leave, because there'll be enormous pressure to cut all the subsidies to agriculture, because basically we are not an agricultural economy. So I don't think that stacks up at all. But the real problem is that you're betting the ranch that the last 30 years will be repeated in the next 30 years. The last 30 years has been about global free trade and more growth in emerging markets. China and India and places catching up. But the next 30 years could be completely different. They'll be driven by very high technology, artificial intelligence, all these things which will make growth actually come to the more developed economies like North America, like Europe. And that is why I think it's a very grave error to make plans on the basis of past history, which is likely to be altered. And on top of that, I think you've also got to shift away from free trade. If we look at the campaign in America, Donald Trump, I mean, he's saying he wants tariff barriers up. He wants to get rid of the WTO. This is not the moment to step into a global economy which is highly competitive and likely to be gravely to our disadvantage.
I think all you need to realise is that in the very near future, as I said earlier, only 20% of world trade will actually be in the European Union. 80% will be outside. If we stay inside, we can deal with the 20%. I would prefer to concentrate on the 80% and know that under any agreement, and it doesn't matter which one you wish to pick, there will still be trade within Europe. They need us as a trading partner, and we need them as a trading partner. No one is going to give that up.
It is a good point that is being made by Irwin, in that Britain is still a great trading nation outside of the EU as well. They still have the Commonwealth links, still have very good links throughout Asia, and now increasingly in Africa, with countries there starting to rise, potential trading partners. So would Britain really suffer if it went out? Would Britain not revert to being the great trading nation that it once was?
Yes, we would, because we've moved into being overwhelmingly a services economy, and services is sold to developed markets overall, like North America and like the EU. And if we could have no prospect of opening up markets for services in the EU if we're not a member. And that's where the shift of trade towards services and away from manufacturing is accelerating. And that's where we need to concentrate on getting trade deals. And that requires, in my view, the strength of being in the EU as a negotiating bloc.
And it's worth the money that, as Irwin and others are saying, has to be sent to the EU, that would it not be better for Britain to have control of its own money and control of its own courts, for example?
Well, in trade negotiations, when you cut a trade deal, you have arbitration arrangements now. I mean, that's what we're talking about in the TTIP negotiation, for example, with the Americans. The European Union has those institutions already, which is why it's easy for the European Union to do those sorts of platform deals, which is the way the future is going. The WTO is just about tariffs. Free trade now is about much, much more than tariffs. It's about regulations, it's about arbitration, it's about legal procedures, and that is where you need the strength of the EU.
Aren't you concerned, Irwin, because you do employ migrant workers up in your factory in Ballymena? Are you not concerned that by leaving the EU your ability to recruit migrant workers might be affected? You mightn't be able to get the people that you need.
I don't see how. There's no one suggesting that the migrants who are here are about to leave. And in fact, there's nobody suggesting that we won't welcome a lot more migrants into the country. We will be allowed to be selective about which ones. We'll be allowed to send those back that are lawbreakers and have prison records at the moment that we are not allowed to do. But I don't see any prospect of us actually not having immigrants coming to the UK. We actually need them because, the sort of elephant in the room is that our growth over the past few years has, to a certain extent, been fuelled by the 3 million immigrants who have actually contributed substantially to our economy. So that is not going to stop.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to let you make one last point.
Well, the immigrants who have contributed have been from the EU, European immigrants. The problem that we've had with immigration has been overwhelming with people from outside the EU. And that is why I think having an immigration policy that has a European preference to it is actually rather sensible.
Okay, thank you both very much indeed.